Welcome everyone to Transfer Transitions, New Transfer Student Advisement in the New Normal. My name is Crystal D4. I'm one of the Senior Academic Advisors within the Office of Academic Advisement at Lehman College, and with me is...
Hi everyone, I'm Tashana Daniel, also Senior Academic Advisor in the Academic Advisement Department.
So today, Tashana and I are going to discuss the technologies used in the new normal and how we have applied it to advising transfer students in the enrollment process. Before we dive in, a bit of background information on the Office of Academic Advisement. So our cohort of students are transfers, and we have 3 specialized advisors who guide students on majors in the health field or careers in the health field. We also have 6 general academic advisors who advise students otherwise. If you take a look to the right, you'll see our enrollment numbers for the past 2 semesters and for this semester. And if you take an even closer look, you'll notice that there has been a significant decrease in enrollment between or compared to spring 21 and spring 20. And also for fall 20, you can see that our numbers were really high. And this could be for a variety of reasons. Some students saw virtual learning as an opportunity to return back to Lehman and continue with their degree. And some students may have said this may not work for them. Take it away, Shoshana.
Thank you, Crystal. So I'm going to talk about how technology has impacted our Department of Academic Advisement. For many of us at our institutions this past year, we have learned that there's been many transitions, especially from the locations of our offices, with also the increase of technology. For many of us, this has not been a walk in the park. There has been many challenges along the way. But what I can assure you is what we have been doing is meeting students where they are at. Technology has been that one constant tool that has allowed us the opportunity to stay connected. In our Department of Academic Advisement, what you will see is that we had transitioned pre-pandemic and into our new normal. Prior to adjusting into our new normal, we primarily solely did advisement in person. So we only advise students in person. A few advisors in our department would occasionally advise students through electronic email and or by phone. But when we had to enter into this new world in March of last year, our worlds just went turning. We were like, what's going to happen? How can we provide the same resources to students and support online? In our new normal, we had to figure out how is this going to work and transition solely to virtual advisements. For our department, when this process started, we had a lot of conversation weeks before we were no longer on campus. We had to make sure we had the right tools and such as in reference to computers, laptops, tablets, and making sure that those also functioned with the internet supply that we can be able to connect. For some of us, this was a challenge in our department and we were unsure of how it was going to work, but with the support of each other, we were able to get it going. So what you will see on the next slide is the different types of technology that we utilized. So as you can see in the new normal, our utilization of technology has definitely increased, probably even doubled from the time that we were in person. While pre-pandemic, we were actually just using CUNY services and applications to advise students, with the exception of QList, which we use to log students in for appointment meetings, and Slick Text, which we would send text messages to students to inform them, especially during our peak registration periods. In our new normal, you can see that a lot of this technology has increased to help us stay afloat and to connect with students. So in the next couple of slides, what I will be discussing is how technology has impacted our office and throughout the different services that we provide. What you can see in terms of staff communication, pre-pandemic, what happened was that we pretty much would get up from our desk, socialize with each other in our offices. If we had any questions or concerns about anything related to policies, we would just pick up the phone, right? When we're with our student and say, hi, Crystal. Can you please tell me, does HUM 150, does that apply as an elective class for a student? And, hopefully the advisor will respond and assist you. Now in our new normal, we were like, oh my gosh, how are we going to be able to get things answered? So when we first started in March, we solely focused on email as a way to communicate amongst ourselves as staff members in the department. But then that soonly transitioned to WebEx Teams. WebEx Teams is what we use to do our instant messaging, to share information about academic policies. And then we would also use Zoom to conduct our staff meetings. But when our institution decided that we were no longer going to use Outlook as a form of email, we transitioned onto Microsoft 365. We therefore stopped using WebEx and then transitioned onto Microsoft Teams. What we found with Microsoft Teams, one of the benefits is that it definitely streamlines communication. Everything is in one nice area. Through the instant messaging, we can add files to this drive. You can always go back and see conversations that you've missed. So it definitely keeps us abreast and informed as a staff together. I think one of the challenges that we've had as a staff is sometimes some people are not able to maybe identify where the files may be, but once you teach everyone, it's easy to access.
And I will say that using Teams, we are more in communication with each other than we were in the office. So sometimes advisors will share their advisement experience, or if they have a quick question, they can just type it. And I think it's easier for us to maintain that office environment, even though virtually, because everything is electronically via laptop or computer. So we're always in constant communication.
And one thing I would say to add on to what Crystal said, we have been able to communicate not only amongst ourselves, but also with a lot of different departments on campus more seamlessly. So before, if it was in person and you kind of stop by someone's office to ask a question, maybe in financial aid, they may have lines outside their doors, assistant students, and you may not have a chance. But just chit-chatting or sending a message through Teams, we have found out that we're receiving a quicker response and getting things answered and assisting the students holistically. The other thing that I would like to talk about is now that you have an understanding how the staff communicates with each other, let's talk about how students are able to connect. So when we first started, let me backtrack a little bit. Pre-pandemic, of course, we would have students come into our office, and mainly that's how they would connect with our front desk staff to schedule advisement appointments, ask any quick questions and concerns that they may have. In the new normal, when we first started, we solely again focused and connected with students primarily through email. What we quickly found out was that email was probably not the best way because we were inundated with so much emails. When I'm talking about a lot of emails, it was 600, 700, that we were not able to keep up with a consistent response to a lot of these students' inquiries in a timely manner. So what happened was we not only we got rid of, I would say, the email, and then we transitioned on to Microsoft Forms. And Microsoft Forms, we had a form in which students could fill out for advisement. This was for our continuing transfer students. And then what happened would be that advisors would go ahead and then every day, different advisors was assigned different days and times and respond to these inquiries. What we realized was that we were able to assist students in a little bit more timely fashion than it did with the email. Then what happened was the institution implemented a system called IVAI, also known as the chatbot. And when that happened and was implemented, we stopped using Microsoft Forms, but we still continue to utilize the services of the phone and the chat box. Now that you understand how students were able to communicate with us, how they were able to schedule appointments in our new normal was pretty much very similar to pre-pandemic. The only difference I would say is, again, we no longer used email, and students would use Advisor Track. So Advisor Track is a system in which students are able to go ahead and schedule their own advisement appointments. This allowed students the opportunity to take a look at their personal schedules and see the availability of advisors to be able to schedule themselves. So in the pre-pandemic and new normal, everything was pretty much the same except for the fact that we no longer used email, and then we added the chat box. So I would like to take a few minutes now to give you guys some perspective of how the chat box feature works. So on the screen, students are able to access the chat box feature by logging on to our virtual service page. Once the student clicks the little lightning bot in the right-hand corner, it will ask them if they're willing to speak with a representative. If the student says yes, then the student will have to fill out a contact form. When the student fills out this contact form, they have to include their IMPL ID, first name, last name, a telephone number, and email. Once this form is completed and the student submits the form, that information, the student then is going to be asked, they're going to be, showed which departments are available through the live chat at that moment. And what you will see is that this student was able to select and see all the different offices and select academic advisement. So once the student selects a department, they can go ahead and ask their questions and concerns. What you will see on the next slide is the advisement view on how this chat box looks. So on the advisor side, what you will notice is that you will see the contact information that the student put into the questionnaire. What's nice about this is that the advisor can utilize this information and open up the student's account information while the student is asking their concerns. Many times, hopefully, many times the IMPL ID has been correct, but sometimes it's not. Also, we're able to see exactly what the student is typing before they actually send the message. So sometimes this is a good thing because we can prepare ourselves to respond, but sometimes it's not so good because sometimes we get a little tech savvy and respond quicker to the student rather than waiting for them to respond.
And also, I'm one of those people, I get really tech happy and or text happy, and I start answering their questions, and then I'll click send before they even ask their question. But I think a lot of us advisors end up doing that because we can advise multiple students on IvyBot, on the live chat. So to go back and forth and make sure we answer in a timely manner, we kind of do get a little excited.
And the most students that we usually are able to see at most times is about 3 students we can go back and forth with. And then once we end our session with one, then we're able to add on another student from the queue to be able to connect with them.
We're also able to go back and forth, transfer students. So not only do we have advisors using the live chat, but we also have the front desk using it, the main office. So if the secretary has a question that's more advisor related, she can transfer the student to us, to the advisor, or if we have something that's more maybe admin related, we can transfer that student back to the front desk.
So now that you have an understanding how students can schedule appointments with us, I'm going to discuss very briefly about the tools that we utilize for our advisement services. So pre-pandemic, pretty much again, we utilized CUNY's applications. And then we also had a lot of forms on paper. A lot of times students would come into our office to complete an excess credit form and or permission to repeat form. And advisors in our department would have to approve these forms. In our new normal, that forms or those forms have now transitioned onto Lehman 360. What Lehman 360 is a hub in which students can identify all of the technology tools that they will be utilizing throughout their time at Lehman. So on this site, those 2 forms were now uploaded, and what students would do would go on there, fill out the form, and an advisor on the other end will go ahead and respond to the student, either denying or approving the request. In addition to that, we advise solely through Zoom for our advisement appointments, being able to share screens and so forth, as we're doing today in the presentation. With Zoom, I think it works great. But one downside is, I would say, sometimes we're not sure if we're speaking to the correct student. So sometimes that can be a challenge. And sometimes there's so much things happening, right? So now we are living in each other's houses. We're always present. So one example that I had with a student, in which it was a little bit challenging, was that a young student was there speaking to me, really trying to pay attention, but she was started off in her kitchen. And it seems like her family members were talking. Then she went to the living room, and it seemed like they followed her to the living room. Then she transitioned into her bathroom, and it seems like it still wasn't quiet. And then finally, she was able to land in her bedroom, and we were able to get through the session. So we are definitely meeting students where they are at and trying to accommodate them the best that we can. And I can also see the great efforts of students as well on their end. And then we also utilize a virtual page that we have. Is called our virtual service page, in which all of our contact information for academic advisement, as well as all administrative and academic programs, are listed there. Now that you've had the side of how technology has been implemented into our area, Crystal will speak now about the enrollment process for our new transfer students.
Yes, thank you, Tashana. So Tashana discussed the technologies that our office has used in the new norm. And before I explain to you how we apply it to advisement for new transfers, it's best you have an understanding of what the enrollment process was like on campus. The students would receive their acceptance letter. They would also then meet with an academic advisor, either one-on-one or with a group advising session they can join. Then they would meet with an faculty advisor to be advised on the major. Then they would return to the academic advisement area to utilize our registration lab. And that lab was an old advisor's office that we converted into a lab. In the lab are help coaches who would assist students with declaring their major, activating their Lehman account, and of course, searching for and enrolling in courses. The last step, post-advisement, that was mainly for students who attended an advisement session during the height of peak registration. So we would advise them to return mid-semester for a more detailed advisement session. And that's because we were so focused on letting the students know what classes they have to enroll in for the upcoming semester. So when they return post-advisement, it's more everything, their gen eds, their liberal arts, and so forth. So the pandemic then fell upon us, and we started brainstorming, well, how are we going to accommodate students with virtual advisement? So we thought, well, let's just follow what we did when we were in the office on campus and apply it to virtual advisement. So this is what we anticipated advisement would look like. Students would still receive their acceptance letter via email, followed by another email from admissions in which their transfer credit evaluation, aka TCE, is complete and that they can schedule an appointment to meet with an academic advisor. And just to let you know, the TCE is a list of courses students completed at their previous college and how it's equivalent to the courses at Lehman. Both academic and faculty advisors refer to this form to determine which courses transferred into what gen ed and major courses and which courses remain. So after students schedule the appointment, they would of course meet with an academic advisor, either one-on-one or join a group advisement session just like they did on campus. And then they would move on to step number 4, meet with a faculty advisor, only virtually this time. And then they would join a Zoom room for assisted registration, just like they did on campus, the registration lab. So this is what we envisioned it to be, but this is what it looked like instead. So When students are at step number 1, where they receive their acceptance letter, they jump the gun and move to step number 3, in which they schedule an appointment to meet with an academic advisor, only to be told that their TCE is not complete and they cannot be advised. So they can either move from 1, 3, meeting with an advisor, to 5, and they end up at 5, even though they're at step 1, because they can be proactive while they wait for their TCE. And being proactive means declaring their major and activating their Lehman account. So then when students reach step 2, where they're supposed to be, and they have their TCE, they are to schedule an appointment via live agent, as Tashana mentioned, or on their own to meet with an academic advisor. But they don't move from 2 to 3. They jump to 4, in which they meet with a faculty advisor. And it has its pros and its cons. It is better if a student meets with an academic advisor, as we advise on everything, and then they meet with a faculty advisor to discuss their major. But sometimes they're more focused on what classes they have to take for their major, and they don't really think about gen eds, especially if they're transferring in with an associate's degree. So after step 2, when they are at step 3, when they're supposed to be, they meet with an academic advisor, but they go back and forth between 3 and 5. And that's because they either haven't declared their major, because they are not sure of a major, they either completely have no idea, or they have multiple majors in mind, or some students, they feel comfortable meeting with an academic advisor first before they declare their major. So they'll move from 3 to 5, in which we would advise them to declare their major. This way, when they meet with faculty, the faculty advisor can just go ahead and approve of the major. And we also encourage them to maybe move from 3 to 5, because faculty advisors will not approve of a major until they meet with the student. They want to make sure that the student, if the major is a good fit for the student. So to avoid the student going from 3 to 4 to 5 to 4, they would jump from 3 to 5. And then, of course, they will go to step 4 and back to step 5. So it can be a lot of back and forth, or a triangle or circle between 3, 4, and 5 for the students. So now that you have an idea of the enrollment process, for the next few slides, I'm going to discuss in detail steps number 3 to 5 and compare it pre-pandemic to the new norm. So pre-pandemic, all advisors, general or specialized, met with students in their office one-on-one, with the exception of general advisement. Sometimes students were able to join an impromptu group advisement session, and that was normally during peak registrations. So if a student came in and we saw that 4 or 5 of them had an AA or an AS degree, we would advise them in groups of 3, because the requirements are very similar. So pre-pandemic, it was the same across the board for all types of advisors. In the new norm, same thing somewhat. It's the same in the fact that all advisors now meet with students via Zoom, but for general advisement, students can still be advised via join a group advisement session. But for the pre-nursing and health science in the new norm, they implemented drop-in advisement. So this allowed students who were ready to meet with an advisor, just join a Zoom room and be advised. And this idea was created because when students schedule appointments, they can do so up to 3 weeks in advance. And what we notice is that the longer or further away a student schedules an appointment, sometimes they're less likely to join for many reasons. And so if they don't join, that advisor is left with an appointment slot. And it's not as simple as when we were on campus, where a walk-in can be seen if a student doesn't show up. So what do you do via Zoom when your student doesn't show up? And so that's why drop-in advisement was it was a great idea. For the pre-health advisement in the new norm, this advisor created a pre-health Health Hub using MS Forms. And so that was a list of questions students would answer to determine if they do indeed need to meet with him or if they need to meet with another health advisor or health focused advisor, or if they just need to meet with a general advisor. So we've been very creative with how to accommodate students in the new norm. So I mentioned group advisement. Now, group advisement in the new norm, at first it was only for students who have an AA or an AS degree, and that was held by a facilitator, a staff worker. Then Tashana and I, we partnered to have group advisement for students who have an AAS degree or no degree. And so when students are given the link to join a group advisement session, they are led to a Zoom registration form. And there are two important questions on that form for students. One is, what major do they plan to declare? And what type of degree, or if they will receive a degree. And that's because for their major, group advisement is not for students who are interested in any health field or career. They have the specialized advisors for that. And as far as the major, or I'm sorry, as far as the degree or no degree, that's because there are two different sessions. So we want to make sure that a student who has an AA or an AS degree doesn't join the other advisement session in which the information does not pertain to them at all. That would just cause confusion. So during the AAS or non-degree session that Tashana and I host, we would play a video for students, as you can see on the lower left. And that video will entail the technology students are going to use moving forward, as well as all of their general education courses that they need to complete. And of course, other information to complete the enrollment process. So at first, when Tashana and I started doing group advisement, we would speak live, but it was a lot of work because we had numerous sessions throughout the day. And sometimes you would have about 30, 35 students join. And so to speak for almost 30 minutes and then meet with students one-on-one, it was really time consuming. So while students are watching this video, Tashana and I will do some background admin work. So we would either compose a post-academic advisement email to send to the students, or we would remove registration holds so they can register afterwards. When the video ends, we take the students enter breakout rooms, and then Tashana and I will hop in and out, and we will personalize the general education requirements as it pertains to them. Okay. Step 4, faculty advisement. So students receive this link to the virtual student services page, which Tashana mentioned earlier. Students, when they meet with an advisor, whether one-on-one or group advisement, they have this link. And this link lets students know the preferred method of communication for faculty departments, their office hours, and also there's a link in which they can click on to join a Zoom room and meet with the advisor right away. During group advisement session, we encourage students to be proactive while they wait for Tashana and I to enter their breakout room. And we tell them to click on this link, see if they can schedule an appointment to meet with their faculty advisor, or just look at the hours when the advisor is available to see if they can possibly meet with them after the group advisement session or sometime in the near future. And some of these departments, they've done a great job with their website. So if you can take a look here, this is psychology. They list the days and hours in order, and there's a join Zoom here link, as well as a contact email from whomever they're meeting with. So this is a great web page. And it's, like I said, it's evolved. Before, in the beginning of the pandemic, some departments, they only had their email or just really basic information. And then it seems like all departments are in sync. They all have detailed office hours and links to join a Zoom room. So it's gotten better for students and even for staff when we need to refer students to a department. So step 5, assisted registration, you can take a look at this chart and you'll see that it's pretty much the same. Whatever we did on campus, we just transferred it to be virtually. There are some challenges to that. When the help coaches assisted students on campus with registration, they were more hands-on. So they had more control of the computer. So if a student was struggling with enrolling in a course, they can just take that computer, log in, show them, guide them. But of course, virtually, the help coaches cannot just dive in to the computer and take control of that screen. So while the services are the same, there definitely are some challenges. But though there are challenges, there are some great benefits of virtual advising. As you can see, you can take a look at this list. What stands out for me, I remember while I was on campus, students, and quite a few students, would take time off from work and they would just walk in the office thinking that they can meet with an advisor right away, only to be told that we're booked or something. But we would still accommodate them. But now, advising virtually, I've advised students while they were in, let's say, at work. This week, I advised someone who worked at a hospital, and she was in the medical supply room meeting with me. And so we're able to accommodate them and not have to worry about them taking time off from work or traveling and so forth. So there are some benefits to it.
And I definitely agree with my colleague Crystal. Students have been able to definitely save time, and it allows them to hopefully put forth a little bit more effort. I feel as an advisor on my end with my appointment schedules, I've noticed that when we were in person, sometimes I would have a lot of no-shows and therefore be able to have to assist walk-in students. For the walk-in student, that was great, but then for the student that didn't show, they would have to come back in, schedule an appointment, and it'll be a whole process. At least functioning virtually as a virtual advisors, I feel like students are more now attending their advisement meetings, and we're having less of an appointment no short than we did before while we were in person. In addition to that, I feel like our department is being able to connect to a lot of different student populations, maybe that we have not connected with before, such as sometimes students have social anxiety. So a lot of these students that may have social anxiety are not able to feel comfortable to log onto Zoom, not really have to show their face, but be able to ask all the questions and concerns that they may have. In addition to that, even working with students internationally, as well as even working, as Crystal said, with that full-time working student that comes into our department.
And even though we can meet students wherever they are, whether it be at work or home or so forth, sometimes the downfall is how much attention are they giving to what we're saying to them. So that's one of the challenges of virtual advising. I remember one of our colleagues stated that he advised a student who was in a park doing push-ups and his phone was right in front of him. And so the thought that came to my mind is, well, are you taking notes? Are you going to remember what we said to you? So that can be a challenge with virtual advising, and also technology difficulties, especially with the internet. So I remember one session I spent 15 minutes trying to assist a student with her audio, and sometimes my internet is in and out. So I would say technology, and wondering how much attention are they giving us and themselves for their education.
As Crystal mentioned, we definitely become IT helpers as well.
Mhm.
So throughout this environment, we definitely spent a lot of time trying to make sure that first the student is able to connect with us, and then further diving in and addressing all the academic concerns. I think another challenge is sometimes while using Zoom, sometimes if you're sharing your screen, if we have multiple tabs open, sometimes we're sharing too much information, right?
Mhm.
So sometimes we have to be careful of what is being shared because we do not want to break student confidentiality. So we want to be very mindful of how we're sharing our screens and the information that we are displaying to students, because we know that sometimes we're working from many different systems and shifting and going back and forth. So we just want to be mindful of that. Also, I think another challenge sometimes of working virtually is that when do we actually stop working, right? Many of us, because we're working virtually, it's like we're always on the clock 24/7. It's like, okay, right now I have to attend to my family, but I'll be back in the afternoon to answer some email responses, right? So it's like we have to really find that balance and really take into consideration self-care and set boundaries for ourselves, because we don't want to be burned out advisors. We want to be able to give the student the best that we can offer to them mentally, to be able to assist them with their growth and development. So if you haven't set boundaries, really try to do that for yourselves. Try to get it into a routine, make it a habit. You know, you're going to start at this time and finish this time and move forward. Also, a lot of us has put Zoom applications on our zone in our phones. I know for me, my phone is always going off, right? So it's sometimes actually turning that application off, disconnecting, and really getting to enjoy yourself and engage in your own personal activities.
And I know earlier in my presentation, I mentioned, or my portion of it, I mentioned that when we moved from in-office to virtual group advisement, that we just decided to transfer whatever was done on campus to virtual. And it's not always that easy. In the office, I used to be able to give students this transfer packet. And in the packet, it had a list of courses that students can refer to for either pathways or electives. And what I would do is I would cross out the courses that students did not need to or should not refer to when they are trying to enroll in classes. And virtually, that's impossible. I can't just cross out the paper and maybe scan it to the student or just hand it to them over the computer. And so what I have done, if a student is struggling with determining what classes not to take, based on the list that we gave them, and they can't compare it to, let's say, degree works, I would go to MS Word, the document is in Word form, and I would eliminate the course from that form, save it as the student's name and EMPL, and then email it to them. And that's not really as simple as just crossing it out in the office and giving it back to them. So there are some challenges. It takes away from having someone in front of you.
But with all of these challenges and benefits, there's definitely some lessons that we have learned along the way. I think for me, the most important lesson has been to be open to change and to be flexible. If you're open to these change and these opportunities, then everything else hopefully will fall into line and into place, and we'll be able to provide the necessary services that we can to our students.
Right. And being creative. Group advisement, we have been very creative with it, from it focusing on only one cohort of students to another cohort, or now all transfer students can join a group advisement session. And from recording a video that was 20 minutes to re-recording it to 8 minutes. And now one of the facilitators for the group advisement session, she's no longer a part of our office. And so Tashana and I, we're brainstorming with how would we like to move forward with group advising. Do we want to put all students together? Do we want to divide it? Like, what are we going to do? So you have to be creative and flexible and willing to just take a challenge. Because of the ideas we've brainstormed, we decided that we're going to try all of them. And that's because in your mind, it may sound like, oh, this makes sense, this will work. And when you do it, maybe it'll work the first time, but not after that, or maybe it wouldn't work at all. So you never know until you, I guess, try, that, as that saying goes. So yes, so you have to be creative, flexible, and just be willing to do a lot.
So with this being said, now that we've learned a lot of different lessons, and like our guest speaker today said, Dr. Nutt, we're going to have to start thinking about how the future of advisement in our department is going to look. So in the future, what we've noticed so far and what we've already discussed is that we will keep some form of virtual advising in our department, because it has allowed us the opportunity to see that we're able to connect to more students that we may not have in person. In addition to that, we will also be hopefully in the near future implementing flipped advisement. giving the student the opportunity to engage in information from our office in a more interactive way, whether through videos, PowerPoint, infographics, making sure that they can learn the basics so that as advisors, we can be able to dive in deeper and work with students holistically to develop them and help them to achieve not only their academic goals, but also move forward with their career goals as well. And then we're also, hopefully by this fall, we should have EAB. And this would hopefully for us as a department streamline a lot of our advisement systems. So instead of having multiple systems to do many things, we'll just have one system in which we can manage our caseload, be able to have students schedule their appointments. And this hopefully is going to be able to have everybody be in one area and see this information without having much confusion.
So now questions. I think that I did see some.
So we had some in the beginning. Someone asked, are all advisors required to do virtual sessions, or can they choose to do phone sessions? And are advisors required to have camera on? So all of us are required to utilize Zoom. We do not necessarily have to have our camera on, but it's strongly recommended so that we can keep that personal connection with students. And sometimes we do phone appointments. It depends. Sometimes first we start off on Zoom and there's connectivity issues. So then we may transfer onto the phone system where we can be able to assist students.
And it all depends on what's comfortable for the student. We have to remind ourselves that when students come on campus, it's their escape from whatever they're dealing with at home. And so now that they're being advised at home, what if they're not in an environment where they want everyone to see their background? Or like I've mentioned before, some of them are being advised while they're at work. So students initiate contacting an advisor for advisement via Zoom. So if they want to call in via phone using Zoom, they can. And if they want to just do a video call, they can. So it's all about what's comfortable for the student.
And another question,
how
many people are in the Department of Academic Advisement? So we have 3 specialized advisors, and then we have, what would you say, Crystal?
we have
5
6.
general advisors?
I think we have 6 general advisors. So we have 6 general advisors and 3 specialized advisors. So there's the pre-nursing advisor, there's the pre-health science advisor. So she advises students who are interested in any major under health science, the department. And then the pre-health advisor, you don't necessarily have to have a particular major, but you do want to enter the health profession. So if you just have to be interested in entering the health profession. Yeah. We did skip a question. So are there set hours for the chat bot? Yes, there are. The hours are 9 to 5 for our department, for the Office of Academic Advisement. Every department is different. So admissions has their own hours. Financially, just join us. They have their own hours. It all depends on the department. Are there designated faculty per department major, or do students meet with the faculty member available at that time? I think it would be the latter. They meet with the advisor at that time, but some departments do have a set advisor. So social work, there's really one who would respond to students. Would you say, do you know of any other departments, Tashawn, offhand, where there's a set advisor?
I think mostly admissions. Did you mention admissions?
No, for faculty. So I think it would be
Okay.
social work and SPV, a handful, but really there
Business
aren't any.
department too, business.
Oh yes, business, there are 2, yes. So some, yes. Let's see.
And the platform for the chatbot is Ivy AI. So that's the platform that we utilize, Ivy.ai.
Do any of the pre-professional program majors at Lehman have, where am I?
Crystal, before you ask the next question, in
Mhm,
addition to that, talking about the chatbot,
mhm.
asks, how was it implemented, customized for your campus? So prior to the releasing of it, they spoke to each of the areas. They spoke to our director and asked them how they wanted to utilize the tool. And then we would be able to give input on with whether or not we wanted to have kind of like canned responses, which is like what is it called? Quick responses that will pop up if a student asks something similar to that question, that we can just automatically click on. In addition to that, what would happen before the system was implemented, it stayed at our institution and retrieved the information. So any information about like different departments and the services they're provided, the system would feed into that information so that they can kind of give those canned responses when student asks questions. So it did take some time for that development before it was actually released. But in terms of us just utilizing the system, that was pretty a quick onboarding. We did have some training on how to utilize it, and then go from there. It's a nice system. You can also track on that system. You can see how the frequency of how many people are coming on. It tracks all of that data. Students are able to give feedback on the services that they provided as well, how many stars or points they give that person that they spoke to, and also leave comments. So it's very beneficial.
Okay. So someone inquired about the programs for the pre-health. Oh, okay, pre-professional programs. Is there an approval process? So if you're talking about pre-professional as pre-law, no, well, there's no approval process for a lot of majors except for or any of the majors except the ones that do require an application, and that would be social work and nursing. But the others, if students want to declare it as a major, they can, but no, they don't.
Another question was, what is the size of your caseload and how many students per an advisor?
Oh, we don't have a caseload. I would say when we were on campus, it's what, 6 general advisors would see about 13 students a day. We had appointment slots for 13 students. And I think now it's 7. Is it 7, Tashana? Do you remember how many you have? So we changed it. On campus, it was 30 minutes. Now it's 45-minute appointment slots. So it ranges from 6 to 7 students per advisor per day. I'm not sure about the specialized advisor. The pre-nursing advisor, I give her credit. She's brave. She has 30-minute appointment slots from 9 to 5 with the exception of her lunch break. And I think that's a lot because you have to take into consideration technology and so forth.
The only ones that really have caseloads would be our pre-nursing and our health science advisors. And then of course our pre-health for those who are interested in that field. For the rest of the generals, we see the rest of that population.
Oh, so I think we answered that about the chat bot again. How do you deal with camera shy students? Home settings. I accepted. We just don't know what students are going through. So I don't have a problem with the student having their camera off or calling in. The only time I have an issue with it is if it's a new transfer student and they're using the phone. It's hard to, I feel like they're not understanding what I'm saying because they can't see this new information being given to them. But I respect anything that students want. Because they receive a follow-up email. And some of the information is simple if they are a continuing student. So I don't know how you feel, Tashada.
As myself, I also respect it, but especially for new transfer students, I strongly encourage them to join the Zoom. They don't necessarily have to put their video, show their face if they're uncomfortable, but at least allow me the opportunity to share my screen so that they can better understand the information. So there's times when I've had a student has called in and I realized that they are a new transfer student. I would just kindly simply ask them, is it possible for you to go ahead and transition onto Zoom format where I can be able to share my screen with you and you can better understand the information, because speaking it to you, since it is a lot of information, may be hard for you to understand. And what I've realized, a lot of students have been very open to that and understanding, and then they would just transition onto that system.
Sure, Kate, you can go ahead.
It looks like Benjamin has his hand up, and he just disappeared from my list.
No, I'm still here. Sorry.
There you are. Hey, Benjamin, do you have a question for us?
Yeah. I was just I noticed that obviously we can plan as much as possible, but once we implement things, they don't always seem to follow suit. So with the steps you have when students are transferring into your school, what is the turnaround? I also put this down in the chat, sorry. What's the turnaround when you have students who skip over those steps? For instance, they transfer in, their transfer credits haven't been evaluated, but yet they're meeting with an advisor. So when you have to go back to the admissions or transfer evaluation people, how long does it usually take for you guys to receive a correction of those records so that you can actually implement registration for the student?
I would say it varies. It depends on when they receive the acceptance letter. So sometimes students would receive the letter and then maybe the acceptance letter, then 2 weeks when they don't receive any information on meeting with an advisor, they can go ahead and schedule the appointment. Or sometimes it's the day after, the day of. So it varies. It's hard to say, but I think on average, the time for the TCE to be completed is about maybe 2 to 3 weeks it takes from the
Okay.
acceptance letter.
Okay, that's because we have a similar situation when we're having transfer students come in who aren't evaluated yet and somehow meet with the advisor as well. Given that you guys have implemented and integrated a lot of the new virtual tools, does the whole campus and every office, is everything uniform, or is it harder to get in touch with, like, let's say you need permission from a department for a student to get into a class? Are they all on the same platform when you're during your registration period, or do you literally have to write messages, make phone calls, and then go through red tape in order to get that? Because we're experiencing some of that as well.
Do you want to answer this, Tashana?
I think that for the most part, we're able to communicate a little bit better. I think generally we're kind of on the same page in terms of having people, of course, be able to provide other services to students. I think some of the challenges when we first started we're working virtually was with the academic departments. That was a little bit harder to connect students with, but all the administrative services, we were on pretty much on the same page. I think now I feel for myself that I'm able to connect more quickly and have a lot of questions answered in a timely fashion, more than I did when we were in person, because everyone is usually using Microsoft Teams, or even if I send an email, they're quicker to respond to their emails than they did when we did have in-person services.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, and I do want to say that I have had departments contact me where I've never spoken to them on campus, and it could be a little bit in the middle of students facing difficulty or even staff reaching out to faculty. With MS Forms, I think it helps students because, let's say the math department, for example, if students want to request an appointment, they can go ahead and fill out a form. So I would say it's so-so. It has its moments where, yes, it is a struggle with some departments, and then some, it's like this, it's much easier than being on campus.
Got you, thank you.
You're welcome. And I know that with a follow-up question with social work, do transfer students apply to this directly? If not, how are newly admitted transfer students advised to interact with these departments, especially considering it's not guaranteed that they can start that major? So with social work, no, the students, they have to apply to the program, but before they do, they meet with the advisor the faculty advisor, who will notify the student if they meet the requirements to even move forward. And some departments that require applications or maybe GPA requirements for the major will do that. If not hard, considering that they're not guaranteed. So if a student is not admitted into a program that requires a separate application, they will meet with academic advisors and we will kind of guide them. And that's when we would, I guess, provide somewhat career advising to them or pre-career advising to them, or we can also refer them to career services. But we'll talk to them and ask what are their career goals, what did they envision seeing themselves post-graduation, to determine what major may be better for them, and give them some options that maybe they're not aware of.
Another question that came back was how long is each one-on-one transfer session, and is there a limit? So generally, most of the general advisors will usually meet with students at least 30 to 45 minutes, especially during peak time. Non-peak times, we're usually meeting with students anywhere, I would say probably 15 to 30 minutes. And then for our group advisement sessions, we usually advise students for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. We allow for those sessions.
Okay, so I think that's all the time for questions. Thank you for joining our session. We hope you were able to just learn about our process and maybe apply it to your institution or department.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I love to thank our speakers for joining us today. We did record this session and we do hope to be able to make it available along with all the others after the conference. For anyone who'd like to stay on, our next session in this particular room will be EduCares, Building Bridges for Student Success.
Thank you, ladies.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Crystal, I did have a question real quick for you before you leave.
Sure.
When you guys are talking about the difference between specialized and general advisors, are you saying that there are some advisors in the office that only deal with like transfer stuff, or does that mean like by major?